Hello, everyone. Welcome to Realm Makers. I'm Scott Miner. Tonight we have Allen Arnold on the live stream, and we're talking about Kryptonite creativity. A little details here. If you're on the chat, please go ahead and let us know that you're here. I'm going to bring Allen on.
Hey, Scott.
Allen, it's always exciting to speak with you.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, you've contributed so much to our community over the years. Um, you've been coming almost every year for quite a while. I want to let everybody know that Alan is on March 17th to the 21st of this next month. Alan, you are once again leading our Winter Creativity Summit. And after this is over, I just encourage you guys to check out the website. But Alan, I know you've got some wonderful plans for us.
Yeah, it's going to be an incredible experience. I think even a transformative milestone for you as a creative. And so I hope you can come if you're not registered yet. There's a few spaces left. We'd love to have you there in Colorado Springs. It's at the Hideaway, and it's March 17th through 21st. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the lives and the creativity of C.S. Lewis, Madeline L'Engle, and Jesus. And we're going to look at the ideas and the ways, the practices, the insights that their stories contained, and how that can change and shape us forever as storytellers. And, or just one example is we look at Madeline L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time, for instance, but her manuscript, the first one for A Wrinkle in Time, which is an incredible novel and led to a series, and she did a lot after that in fiction and nonfiction, but it was rejected by dozens of publishers. And she was at the point of giving up many times, and yet she didn't. So we're going to not just look at the stories they told, but the lives they led, because you really can't tell a better story than the life you're living. And if we want to create like C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia or the Space Trilogy or Madeleine L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time and some of her nonfiction, well, we have to live the kind of lives they lived to tell the kind of stories they told. And then with Jesus, that's the most fun part for me, because we know Jesus in a lot of different ways and a lot of different, names like Savior and Lord, but he's also the creator of all things. We read in Colossians 1 that through him, all things were created. And so we're going to look at Jesus and get to know Jesus more as not just a teller of parables, but as the creator of story. I think you're going to love it. It's the 17th to the 21st. It's an intimate gathering of probably 60 people max, modern day inklings, whether you've written a novel or writing your first or you've written 50. It's going to be amazing. And the last thing I'll say is if you are signed up or thinking about it, stay for Friday, because we actually have a post-retreat intensive Friday morning. So at the end of the gathering, we have this half day, and I'm going to talk about 11 steps to manuscript mastery. And this is really the secrets and the techniques I've learned and I coach people on for how to take a manuscript and give it an eternal spark, not just finish a project, but make a difference with it. Give it eternal spark, give it the breath of life. And so that's going to be Friday morning. We're going to pull everything together from the first 4 days in this last half day post intensive. So I hope you can make it all. Please sign up. You will be so glad you were there. And I can't wait to see you in March, just a few weeks away.
We're really excited to be there myself, Alan. And that extra intensive afterwards is something we haven't done before.
Right.
And what is unexpected about the retreat is just the sheer beauty of the place, and really allowing everyone to truly feel a retreat beyond the learning and the time spent really focused. It's really just a gorgeous place, and the people make it absolutely fantastic.
They
And
do.
the food is good.
They do. It is going to be this time of year in Colorado. It is like going into Narnia because it's sunny, but there's also a lot of snow usually. And so it's a very magical feeling this time of year. And to be with others who are like minded, kindred creatives, like how often do you have a chance to do that? And not just do it for an hour or on a Zoom call, but in person, away from all the distractions of life for a couple of days. So, yeah, mark your calendar. This is going to be the kind of event that really changes the trajectory of your year. So, whatever it takes, please try to make it. We'd love to have you there.
And just briefly, for those of you who might be watching on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, if you want to participate in the webinars when you do these, just join the Realm Sphere. It's our private social network. You can go to community.realmmakers.com, and that's where everything Realm Makers happens. But this public webinar, we are simulcasting out into the interwebs. So thank you for joining us there. If you want to participate in the chat and everything, we encourage you next time to join us in the Realm Sphere. Now, how's the weather there now, Alan?
We've had 4 days of snow and ice, and so the sun came out today. So things are starting to melt, and I think tomorrow's going to be the first day with no snow and ice in a couple of days. So that's the weather report.
Got it. Well, we're just having a lot of wind here, and I had to leave our house and come here to the bookstore because the power kept going out like 4 different times. So I knew if I was going to have a reliable internet connection in order to do this with you, I came here to Bookish. This is our physical bookstore in the King of Prussia Mall outside of Philadelphia. And it's where we sell all the Realmy books. And
Wow.
it's kind of the foundation from which we run the mobile bookstore, which will gear up in May. But hey, that's enough of us and Realm Makers. I think I might pass it off to you to start our session today on Kryptonite creativity.
Yes, and Scott, before you do, just when
Yeah.
everybody's listening to this, it always will create questions or, yeah, but what if, or can you explain this more? So if you have a question, put the question in the comment section, and at the end, we
Oh,
will
we've
get,
got a Q&A.
yeah,
We've got a, so just click on the Q&A and they'll be able to put it into the
oh,
actual
perfect.
Q&A. And
Okay,
yeah, people will be able to upvote the questions. If you see your question already put there, you can just give it a little upvote and it'll be one of the first questions answered. So
awesome. Awesome.
great, great.
Okay. Well, let's kick in, guys. So, I'm going to talk to you tonight about kryptonite creativity. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you're a Superman fan, you might already have kind of a clue. But if you're not, don't worry, I'll update you. And you can see behind me on this side over here, I've got a Superman bust. I love the mythos of Superman and what he represents. And the story is actually really cool in that the original story, his origin, where he came from the planet Krypton and he came to this planet and he's living two identities, really his true self as Superman or the being with power, but also Clark Kent, who's just a guy writing for a newspaper every day, right? So we sometimes feel like we have two identities. It's our day to day, make it happen person, but then also the one who's been given this really creative gift from God. And we can't wait to have those stories come alive. And that's our superpower. That's our gift from God as storytellers. And so we're going to look at that through the lens of kryptonite creativity. Okay. And so we'll have some slides up, and you're going to see the slides on half the screen as we talk through everything and some fun visuals. And so just, yeah, any questions you have, let us know and we'll get back to those at the end. But first, I want to start off with this. We are the first canvas of our creativity. And by that, I mean our stories, our creativity, even if we're not trying, they really reveal through the stories we tell, through the way we approach our art, our gifting, our writing, our deepest beliefs, what we really believe about God, what we really believe about life, what we really believe about love and adventure and sacrifice. The stories, the creativity we have can't help but expose that. And it also exposes our personal kryptonite. In other words, these areas that come against our creativity. All of that, whether we wanted to or not, come out in the stories that we tell. So tonight we're going to look at kryptonite creativity. And Scott, can you do the split screen now? Is that where we start? So I want to talk about kryptonite first. What is that for those of you that don't know? Kryptonite in the comic mythology is this green crystalline substance from space that came to Earth, and it emits this toxic radiation that drains Superman's powers and life. So there's so many of the comics and in the movies where this green rock, right, will come out, and it's actually weakening Superman. And do you have that, Scott, that image from the comic of Superman? I think it's earlier. It's way earlier. It's the one of him. Do we have that one of him? No? Yeah, there we go. So this is a comic book cover that some of you saw in the invitation, but I love this. This is from a couple of decades ago, but this is the effect Kryptonite has on Superman. It drains his life force. It causes him to get really weak, and the enemies use it against him, right? Well, so that's what it is. But here's the amazing thing. Kryptonite, while it's Superman's weakness, it doesn't have any effect if you're other characters, if you're just an average guy on the street in the comic or in the story, if you're Batman, Wonder Woman, other superheroes, Kryptonite doesn't affect them. It's a unique element that only affects Superman. So let's go forward, Scott. We can kind of kick into that's what Kryptonite is, and go a couple of more slides, because I want to talk to you about how it's not random for Superman. Kryptonite isn't just this random thing from space that fell down that causes Superman to lose his powers, right? The surprising thing is Kryptonite originated from his home world of Krypton. So it's actually a piece of the planet that Superman, when his rocket, his parents shipped him off in a rocket before the planet blew up, and it actually was from his planet. So go to the next slide, Scott. You can. It originated from Krypton, his home world. And so his greatest weakness, we're going to look at why this matters, came from the world that he came from. And not only is Kryptonite not random for Superman, but our Kryptonite isn't random for us either. And that's the main thing I want to get to tonight. Our Krypton ties to our origin story. Just like Superman's, the planet Kryptonite broke apart, exploded. And when those pieces, those scraps of the planet came to Earth, that was his weakness, right? Well, our weaknesses actually tie to our origin story. In fact, Kryptonite has become this byword over the years and decades for an extraordinary exploitable weakness, or in other words, an Achilles heel. So part of what we want to look at tonight is, what is your personal kryptonite? What is your Achilles heel when it comes to your creativity? You may think, oh, I know what that is immediately. But what I found from working with, over the years, thousands of creatives and being the publisher of hundreds of novels, is most creatives don't fully recognize and realize what their personal kryptonite is. So let's go forward to the next slide, Scott. The thing I want to talk to you about now is your personal kryptonite as it ties to your origin story. I want you to start thinking, even now, before I give you more information, what do you think is the one thing that takes you out? When you think about your creativity, what is the thing, the person, the words, the situation, the belief system that you have? What is it that comes against you, that causes you to shut down, that causes you to doubt, that causes you to want to give up or stop or take a shortcut, or just kind of say, maybe I'm too old, maybe I'm too young, maybe I'll never have time, maybe I'll never have a platform. Whatever it is, just write that down on a piece of paper. If you have a notepad, a journal, post-it note, just write down right now, what would you say your personal kryptonite is, just from the little we've talked about already? What is the thought or the image or the feeling that you have that makes you want to give up on your creativity, on your writing? Okay, so let's go forward on the slide. So while kryptonite is Superman's core vulnerability, in the comics and in the movies, his enemies know that. It's public knowledge, right? So they do everything they can to exploit it. They try to get their hands on kryptonite. They try to carry it with them to sabotage Superman. And in our life, we have an enemy as well, right? Satan is our enemy, and he tries to exploit our weaknesses as well. So on this next slide, you can see that, we read in scripture that the enemy comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. This is from John 10:10. The enemy comes only, not sometimes, or not occasionally, or not as a partial motive. The enemy comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And yes, that includes your life, but it also includes your creativity. See, the enemy wants to steal our dreams, steal our hope, steal our creativity. When we were created by God, we were infused with his breath of life, his DNA. And that includes the DNA to create. He's the creator. We're his sons and daughters. So he invites us to co-create with him. And the enemy, when he chose to rebel against God, lost his creativity. I talk about this a lot in my book, Chaos Can't. So I'm not going to go into that in detail here, but the enemy now doesn't create, he decreates. In other words, he moves against God's creation for decreation, but he's not a creator, and he hates when we have the intimacy with God as his sons and daughters to co-create. So the enemy tries to steal, kill, and destroy. Yes, our life, but also our career, our creativity, our ideas, our stories, right? That's important to know. And while the enemy's trying to do that, then we look at the flip side of the John 10:10 verse on the next screen, and we see that it says, but Jesus came to counter that. The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, right? Jesus comes to counter that, to offer life to the full. And that's not just our physical life, or that's not just our eternal life. It is that, thank God for that gift. It is that, but it isn't just that. It's also for who God created us to be, and that's our creativity. And those of you on this, live stream, it's your stories and your storytelling that you do with God. So Jesus wants to breathe life into the stories that we're telling. He wants us to have our creativity to the full. And I know from coaching creatives, I know from talking to a lot of you guys and talking to just authors at conferences and conventions and one-on-one. When I was a publisher, I had decades of this where I was in that business. And here's what I always heard. I feel like I'm falling short. I feel like I don't have enough time in the day, or my ideas are not coming together. In other words, I'm not creating to the full. Something is in the way. Something is kind of stopping or clogging that, right? And so we want to look at, okay, well, what does that mean to step into our creativity with Jesus? And what is life to the full in our creativity with Jesus? Because some see like Christian fiction or putting Christian elements into their novel. I've heard the expression you have, it's preachy or it's cheesy. Well, if your creativity with Jesus is preachy or cheesy, then you're not creating in the right way. Something's gone wrong, because Jesus, who all things were created in and through, is not cheesy and he's not preachy. And so if he's the ultimate creator with God and we co-create with him, then we should be creating in trueness. In other words, Eden creativity. What was an ocean? What was a tree meant to be? What was a forest meant to be? What was a lion meant to be? What was a stallion meant to be? A wildflower. None of those are preachy or cheesy. They're created in trueness. And that's what you're invited to do with Jesus, is to create in trueness, creativity to the full. In Matthew 13 in the Message, it's really cool how it's a section that I encourage you to read in that particular translation. And the subhead is, why did Jesus tell stories? And he's talking to his disciples. And so the disciples come up. This is verses 10 through 15. The disciples come up and ask Jesus, who's been telling these parables, why do you tell stories? And Jesus replies, you've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works, but not everybody has this gift. So first takeaway is, well, it's a gift, right? There's a gift we've been given. Not everybody has this gift of insight into God's kingdom. It hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understanding flow freely, life to the full. But if there's no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. And then this is a key verse in verse 15. That's why I tell stories. Why? To create readiness and to nudge the people toward a welcome awakening. So, is that why you tell stories? Is that why I tell stories? That's the goal that Jesus had. That's a really good goal for you and I to have. Do our stories create a readiness or nudge people toward a welcome awakening? That's not preachy. That's not heavy handed. Everybody wants to be awakened. Everybody wants to have a welcome awakening and a readiness for reality. That's what your stories as a follower of Christ should be doing. If they don't do that, I'm telling you, they're falling short. We don't just need empty entertainment. We don't just need following a popular trend, right? So those are good goals for your story. Now in Matthew 13, verses 34 and 35, so I'm skipping ahead a few verses. I like how it ends. It says, all Jesus did that day was tell stories, a long storytelling afternoon. His storytelling fulfilled this prophecy. I will open my mouth and tell stories. I will bring out into the open things hidden since the world's first days. Now, I don't know a better goal and a better motivator for you as a creative or me. Get this. Our ability to tell stories, we open our mouth and we create an awakening in people and we bring out into the open things hidden since what are the world's first days? Well, that's Eden. So we bring out into the open things hidden since Eden, and each of us gets a piece of that. Each of us gets a part of it. That's why it's important to use your unique voice, your unique interest, your unique passion, your unique ideas, because you don't need to bring out the part from Eden that he's bringing out or she's bringing out. You need to bring the part you were created to bring out, your unique story, right? So that's a super, to me, motivating, just awesome thing. I get to bring out into the open things hidden since the world's first days, and my stories get to create a welcoming awakening in people. Well, they do if I'm creating with God, and they do if that's my heart's desire. Instead of just becoming a best-selling author, or instead of just having a huge platform, or making a lot of money, or seeing my name on the spine of a book or cover of a book. Now we're going to move forward. What's your creative kryptonite? I asked you earlier, just jot something down, an initial thought, what it may be, a feeling when you have a certain feeling, when something, is said to you or not said to you, if you're looking for validation, maybe. Well, let's look at what your creative kryptonite is. What seems custom made to take you out? Okay. Krypton was the planet. You can see that picture there. This is a phenomenal image from one of the comics that was a little bit more recent than the last image you saw. But Kryptonite, that's Superman's expression, and that's what happens to him when somebody thrusts it at him. It's probably your expression when somebody thrusts at you this thing that takes you out, right? So what is it that somebody says? Like maybe they say, it's never, you're never going to be able to really compete on a level of some authors, or gosh, you're a little bit old to be starting your writing, or wow, I really like what this author does, but you're trying to do something kind of similar and that's already been done. All those things. What is it that you hear that just cause you to go, oh, okay. Or, well, if I could only write full time, but I have a job and I'm exhausted at the end of the day. So I've always got to have a job. I've got to pay the bill. So maybe I'll never be able to do this. What is it that gives this? Look at this image next to me here on the screen. What is it that causes you to feel like that? And it won't be a green glowing, piece of, rock, but it will be something custom made that probably has an origin, in your home world. I'm going to call your home world the things when you were growing up, when you were younger, because the enemy starts with us when we're really young. So it may be things that you heard when you were 10, 12, that your English teacher said or didn't say, that your parents said or didn't say, that your spouse said or didn't say, that your boss says or doesn't say. It may be something that rooted early on that's a belief that's forming an agreement that you need to break. In other words, you need to say, God, I no longer believe this about me, but it's been haunting me. It's been my Achilles heel from as far as I can remember. I just kind of thought it was normal. I just kind of thought everybody struggled with this. And I'm here to tell you, no, that's your unique struggle. And everybody watching has a unique version of kryptonite. So it's not one size fits all. And what are some of the homegrown things that take us out? Well, for some, it's fear. It's fear of success. It's fear of failure. It's a deep seated longing for validation. I want somebody to validate me. And I think if I have a book that people buy and read, or that's in a bookstore on a shelf, or that has my name on the spine and a publisher's logo's at the bottom, then I'm somebody. I've made it. No, that's not true. It's like I've said before, it's like, the young boy or, 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old who gets a tattoo on his, shoulder. And he's like, now I've made it with this tattoo. This defines me. No, you're still just a young guy with a ink on your shoulder. It doesn't define you. It's not bad. It's not good, maybe, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't make you. And being an author doesn't make you more than you are now. Being an author, there won't be unicorns and rainbows and everything won't be easy and simple. And you won't be more than who you are now. You are fully who God created you to be now. You can step into your gifting more, right? But what you can't do is depend on that to validate you. Also, faking it. You hear this fake it till you make it. That's not scriptural. That's not biblical. That's not what I've never heard God say to anyone, fake it till you make it, right? Like, we don't have to fake it. We are fully created sons and daughters of God with creation abilities and gifting within us. We just have to pursue what we were made to bring out of Eden since the world's first days. And now here we are for such a time as this. And then I would just say that here's the danger. When we don't know what our kryptonite is, or we don't try to overcome it, then what we do is we create with a limp. In other words, we're handicapped in our ability to fully be who we were meant to be. And so all these things are weighing us down. Our kryptonite, like Superman, is weakened. And what do we rely on when we're weakened? If we still want to write or have a contract and we have to write, or we're trying to just do it anyway, well, what we start to rely on then is formula. Well, I'm not hearing from God. Well, what's working in the marketplace? Let me just do a version of that. Or this really worked well for this author. Let me do what that author's doing. See, that's not what we were created for. That's not what we were meant to bring out into the open from the beginning of time. That is copying, that is recreating, but we aren't stepping into who we were made to be. And that's what happens when we don't really understand our kryptonite. So here are some steps I just want to take you through. Okay. First step, the next thing to do is see what your kryptonite is. In other words, identify it. This is it. Yep. I have been trying to create for the wrong reason, or partially for the wrong reason. I've been trying to create because I really want to prove to the world I have what it takes. Or I really loved reading as a kid and I want somebody to read my books now. What's wrong with that? Well, I'm not saying that's a bad side thing, is that you enjoy when people read your book, because probably all authors do to some degree. But if that's your reason, then you're looking to other people to kind of make yourself and make your calling valid, right? And if you just created with God on a desert island and could never get off the desert island, and you wrote the best novel in the world and nobody ever read it, would that be enough? Well, if creating with the creator of the universe is enough, then it would be. But if you say, well, if it's enough if one person reads it, you're starting to put a human metric that I don't think God intended to put there, because your gifting isn't dependent on other humans. It's dependent on growing closer to God first and creating with Him. So, what is your kryptonite? What is the thing that starts to take you out? And just write, nobody has to see this but you. Is it the words of another person? Is it a feeling that seems to just come over you? Is it a fog? Is it you just get lethargic every time you try to write? You start to doubt. You start to feel diminishment. What is the lie, the kryptonite, the Achilles heel? So you see it. That's the first thing. What is it? And then the second step, when and it could be more than one thing. The second step is, now I've seen it. Now I need to understand it. So in other words, it's not just what takes you out, but why. Well, when somebody tells me that, this is what takes me out. Okay. Well, now you know what it is, right? But why does that take you out? Well, because when I was a boy or girl, my dad or mom used to tell me this. And when I hear it now as an adult, it triggers me. It causes me to feel like a little kid again, or it makes me feel like I'll never be enough. Okay, so the what and the why have to come together. Understand, why is that such a toxic thing? And going back, to the definition of kryptonite, like, why is it this thing that causes you to get weak? Why is it something that is synonymous with this exploitable weakness that causes you to pull back or give up or postpone what you were meant to do for such a time as this? Really important to understand it. And then third, the thing we want to do after we understand it is we want to then step into overcoming it. Because here's the thing, guys, understanding is not enough. Like, let me give you just an example not tied to writing. If I said, wow, every time I get cut off in traffic, I just rage. And I tell the person who cut me off, and I say things that I would be embarrassed if other people knew, and I just implode. But I know why, because, early on in my life, my dad used to do that. And I was in the car with him as a kid, and I feel out of control. And so now I do it. Well, okay, you know what it is, you know why, but knowing isn't the same thing as healing. So we can know why we do what we do, but if we don't get healing from it, well, then we're just really smart in what takes us out. Like, we can talk about it all day, we can explain it, but we're still in it. We're still captive to it. And so what this thing is, you need to see it. Yes, have clear eyes to understand what's going on, see it, understand it, and then overcome it. Because it's not just knowledge we want, it's healing. And Jesus says, my whole mission for coming, when he was asked, is the Isaiah 61:1, verse he pulls up from the scrolls. And he says, I've come to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free. He has come to set you free and to heal your heart, to awaken your heart, and to heal you from the things that hold you back, from the things that are scars, from the things that are your deepest wounds in life. And you'll never be a writer who is at your greatest ability until you go through this process. In other words, your stories can't transcend your life. If you are a fearful person, your novels, you're a fearful creator. So your protagonist and antagonist and the whole story is going to be filled with your fear. How could it not be? You're the creator of that world. And you don't know a world without fear in your own life, right? Or if you're looking for validation, then you're going to have a needy protagonist. And your, ultimate story kind of wrap up on the hero's journey isn't going to be complete, because you're a needy creator creating a needy story and a world. So I'm telling you these things because I want you to be free from it. And I want you to not be stuck in the things that hold you back. And so a way to get free is when you sit down, just say, God, I want to create with you. And so any voice that's not yours, this whispering things that's causing me to want to shut down, that's bringing up past fears or kind of hot button things that hold me back. God, I pray against that right now. Let there be light. Let me understand it. Let me see it, and let me, through you, overcome it. That's a great beginning. And then start to break those agreements. I break the agreement that I have to live in fear. I break the agreement that I'll never finish this novel. I break the agreement that, nobody cares if I create. I break the agreement that I don't really have anything original to say. Break those agreements. Say it out loud. God, I break this agreement. Now help me know fully why you created me and what I was born to bring life to in these stories. It's a really great process. And this last picture of the comic, it's another cover, but I love it because it shows Superman breaking these, chains as a metaphor to not being held back by kryptonite. Kryptonite nevermore. And so that's what I want for you is I want you to never again be held back by your kryptonite in your creativity. So this is kind of the overview of what we want to talk about tonight. And what I want to do before we dive into your questions is a couple of things. And I hope you have some questions because I want to create a dialogue and a conversation from here. But I do want to tell you if you're liking what you're hearing and if you want to go deeper in this, I invite you into my daily readings. And I focus on God's story and creativity as a coach. People hire me one on one. I speak at events. I write books. But I give a free daily reading every Monday through Friday, like a couple of paragraphs. And you can sign up for that free reading at withallen.com/sign-up. And that takes you to my website. You just put your name in, and every Monday through Friday, what you'll get is like a couple of paragraphs in your inbox from me encouraging you how to see your creativity through this lens of who God created you to be and how to co-create with him in the stories that you're telling. And I've also written some books. These are the five. I reference Chaos Can't, but the story of With is an allegory of how we create with God, and Risk the Real is all about how to be real in an artificial world in your life, in your writing, in just how you see the world. Eden Option. What is story one, story two? We've been sold the wrong story. How do we get back to the right story? Story one. And Waves of Creativity is a devotional of sorts, just thoughts, thought by thought on how to be more creative with God through 111 different topics. And you can read a page a day if you want to in that. But those are just ways to stay in this. Now, before we go into the Q&A, get your questions in, but some of you have come to this tonight and aren't that familiar with Realm Makers. You've never been to a Realm Maker conference. You see the logo here, but you don't really know fully what it is because you haven't been part of that world. Others have been part of this world for a long, long time. But for those of you who have come in that are saying, what is it, Realm Makers exactly? And I like Scott's cool shirt, but what is Realm Makers really all about? Well, we want to show you this minute and a half or so trailer that takes you into the conference, the experience, what it looks like. You can find out more at Realm Makers website, but I want you just to see this as a glimpse into what Realm Makers is all about.
Now, that was the trailer for the expo. I clicked the wrong button. Here's the right button. No sound, you say? That's right. I was playing it wrong. Sorry, guys. Let me head over here. Alan, I'm going to have to pass it off to you while I go look for that. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Do you, when you pass it off, meaning you've got some questions or?
Well, let me give you a question and then I'll come back with that video. The first one we've got here is from Rachel. What if you struggle identifying what your kryptonite is? I like all the examples you've listed. So, do you have advice on how to narrow it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rachel. So, what I would say is the easiest way is to be super observant as to what takes you out, and maybe it's something other people wouldn't even notice. But where does your heart tend to either flatline, or where do you find yourself like getting more fearful, specifically when it comes to your creativity or your writing? What's the word you hear? So different things take, each of us out in different ways, unique ways. So what I would start being really observant over the next couple of days, week, is okay, like what is it that I'm hearing that feels, that makes me want to get up and stop, or that makes me depressed or feel neglected in my gifting or unseen. And another way, so that's a big way. And another way is we get to ask God for things that we don't know, right? Jeremiah 33:3 says, ask and I'll show you things beyond your wildest imagination. So ask God, God, what is it that's been taking me out? Um, and give me eyes to see. That's a great, like short prayer is let there be light. God, let there be light on this. Help me see what's opposing my creativity. Because here's the thing, if you're creating with God, and I hope everybody watching is or will, if you're creating with God, it will be opposed. The enemy's out to kill, steal, and destroy. He's not giving you a free pass. It's not going to be sunshine and roses the whole way. I promise you. And so if you're creating with God, what is coming against you? God, give me eyes to see. Let there be light. So ask him, and also be observant as to what shuts you down, what causes you to kind of shrug your shoulders or feel like you're not enough when it comes to your creativity. That those are really good breadcrumb clues along the way.
All right. And another question is from Terry. What if my origin story was growing up in a twisted quasi Christian church that said imagination is bad? Intellectually, I know it's a lie, but it's hard to shake.
Yeah, it is hard to shake, especially when you've grown up with that. But you probably grew up in a church. That church probably had a lot of other bad doctrine as well. I'm guessing. I didn't go to that church, but probably they missed the mark on several things. If that's what they said about imagination and God is creator, so the best way to do that is not to rely on your own strength, but to say, God, help me break this lie that I was told, this agreement that I maybe made before I even knew I was making an agreement. And so you're actively entering into your story for healing. In other words, you're not trying to grit your teeth and do it in your own strength. You're saying, God, you take away this lie and I'm breaking this agreement. I don't agree, and you're speaking this out loud. We're in prayer. God, I don't agree that imagination is bad. It's good. You created us with imagination. So, God, realign my thoughts to what's true. Give me the mind of Christ. And in this particular area, I renounce it. I break that agreement. And I actually agree that imagination is a gift from you. So you're not just looking for it to, disappear, and you're not trying to make it happen in your own strength, but you're asking God to step into your story to change that belief.
All right, now we got a question from G. How would a Christian approach to writing in certain genres which rarely involve Christian principles, such as horror, um, murder mystery, or psychological thrillers?
Well, here's the good news on that, G. The good news is stories that are horrific. They include, mysteries and people like beyond understanding what's going on, and psychological, thrilling things. So here's what I would say. I wouldn't call it a Christian approach to writing, because that feels like it's a tool, kind of like, let me put on my Christian, get out in my toolbox and put on my Christian approach hat. What you're doing, what I believe, is reflecting reality. So if we believe that God created reality, then what we're trying to do is reflect a true version of what is horrific, what is sacrifice, what is love, what is adventure, what is true romance. So it's not what's Christian romance or Christian adventure, but see, it reframes it. What's reality? Because if the enemy comes to create decreation, right, or offer an alternative reality, no, this isn't real. This is reality. The tree of knowledge versus the tree of life, right? We're going, no, this is reality. We're going back to Eden. What's real? What did God mean when he meant this? And now in our stories, we're simply reflecting a very creative version of reality. But we're not, I think we get hung up when we say, what's the Christian application, or what's the Christian version? Because it feels like, there's 79 versions of it. And I think it helps me to go, I'm not even trying to encourage people to write Christian fiction. I'm encouraging people to write fiction. Write fiction that reflects God's view of reality. And there's a zillion ways to do that. Is an ocean Christian? Is a tree Christian? Is a hummingbird Christian? They reflect what they were meant to be by God creating them in reality. And that's what our stories should do. And so, and that's what most stories don't do, by the way. Most Hollywood movies, most novels, secular novels, they don't reflect God's view of reality. So they're actually reflecting not just a made up story, but unreality or decreation. And so that's how I would answer that. And it's to me very freeing, because God didn't stamp a Bible verse on the back of every elephant and redwood tree. He created in trueness, and let that be enough. And that's what we get to do, is create in trueness and let that be enough.
Now we've got a question from Jolene. Will there be an opportunity to connect with agents and publishers at the retreat? If not, will there be training on those next steps? Now, that's correct. We don't have agents or publishers at the retreat. It's really that's the focus of the conference. But will there be training on these next steps?
Yeah, and I would say, to me, by design, we won't, because this is not a an industry connection conference. It is a soul conference. We're going after the heart and soul of you as a writer. And while we do that, the last thing we need you to be is trying to figure out how to meet with an agent or meet with a publisher and present your idea. Like, we want you to spend time on your own self, your own creativity, and your own heart. So there's plenty of events where you can meet agents and publishers, but this is more of a soul care with very practical, very tangible takeaways. It's going to make you more in demand by agents and publishers. But in these days, there's not going to be any trying to meet with them or even have them there. This is all about you and all about you becoming the kind of writer that agents and publishers would want to get to know. And when I was a publisher and I would go to conferences and we'd have those 10-minute author pitches, which Scott, you've seen happen, at Railmakers, we do some of that and other conferences. Well, I would always find myself, this is so fascinating to me. So they would put their pages down on the table in front of me, and their pages, they thought that's where the spotlight was going to be. But I put the spotlight on them. In other words, I want to know you, because if I know a little bit of your story and I know a little bit about what makes you tick and where your passion is, then I know, at least initially, whether I want to go further and see the kind of stories you write. But if you're a mess, if all you want to do is get a contract for validation, or you're so nervous you can't talk, or everything depends on this one 10-minute moment, I really don't want to be your publisher, because there are things in your life that need to get figured out and aligned before I want to give you a contract and work with you on a story as a creator of a world that you're building. And so that answer, I hope, is a little helpful in that this is for your heart as a storyteller. And the great news is it will impact the ability for you to, when you leave, make traction in those areas in a more authentic way, but it won't happen by design at the event.
All right, here's a question from the Anonymous. Alan, do you believe that every story is in some sense a parable of the truth?
Yeah, I do. And I believe that people who are telling stories that are detached from God are parables of decreation. And so, you watch a series on Netflix and you go, this was a parable on how empty a life is without God. Or, wow, this is a story of somebody who their lust went out of control and they burned it all down. You know, they imploded. Or here's a story set in the future that helps me somehow realize more what sacrifice and love is. And by the way, I'm not saying, I'm saying actually the opposite. Again, we don't need God by name or Jesus by name in every story, and we shouldn't have that, I don't think. But God's name and Jesus' name weren't in most of the parables, by the way, that Jesus told. And so what we want are parables that lead us to reality. Reality, truth comes under reality. Here's truth right here. Here's reality right here. God's reality contains truth. So again, we're trying to show glimpses, facets of a diamond. Turn the diamond, you see another facet as the light catches it differently. We're trying to show facets of God's reality. And truth is part of his reality. And anything outside of his reality, meaning that rebels against it, right? That's not truth. And it's reflecting what life is like, that's an empty void, that's chaotic, that tries to puff itself up, but ultimately is empty. So, yeah, I think in a sense, every story has some kind of parable. And I think Christian fiction has missed it in decades past because they kept trying to teach a lesson or a moral. And those should have been nonfiction, because you don't have to teach a
This kind of
lesson.
touches on that.
Yeah,
If Jesus is truth, then how can a story be true without explicitly mentioning him? Which is what kind of you were just mentioning. Now, for example, The Lord of the Rings.
right, right. Well, again, a story can be an analogy, it can be a parable, it can be it fiction is not a true story. It is a story that touches on true topics. And so you can tell a lot of stories that focus on, love or forgiveness or sacrifice or adventure. And in that story, the book of Esther doesn't mention, no Old Testament story explicitly reference Jesus other than maybe, like hints, like in Genesis, when it's hinted at what's coming against the enemy after the fall. But like you don't we don't have to be explicit to be true or to be real if you're telling a story, right? Because it's coming from somebody who has a Christian worldview and who walks with God. And so, is the parable of the lost coin a Christian parable because it doesn't mention Jesus, or not? Because, it's that kind of thing. So, I think you have to, as a storyteller, go, what is the kind of story that I want to tell? And if you want to be like super explicit, then write a nonfiction book, you know? And if Jesus naturally fits into your story, tell that story with Jesus, in it, and angels in it, and go into some things like that. I'm just saying every story doesn't have to try to be a lesson or a lecture. The ocean is God's creation. The ocean, I feel Jesus when I'm in the ocean, and God's pleasure when I'm in the ocean. And there's no explicit reference in the ocean about that, right? But it's his creation. So it's the spectrum. We have freedom to bring out everything that's been hidden since the world's first days as we create with God, as we know Jesus is the creator, that everything came in and through. Well, now let's have fun. And nothing should go against the reality that God's created or his truth, but you don't have to be explicit in every novel, because people aren't reading your novel for a teaching, they're reading it for a really good story.
So now from Andrea. And what if your kryptonite is in the sharing of stories rather than in the creating of stories? Would that still be a creativity problem or a different problem?
Well, does that mean, I guess my question would be, does she mean marketing in the sharing? Is that like marketing and promotion of the story? Um, so like a story's written and created. If that's what it means, then yeah, I think it is. I still think it's still part of your creativity, and it's still a part of your kryptonite coming against you. And the question, because if you don't know how to share your stories, then it hinders your story getting out, and that feels like the fingerprints of the enemy on that, not of God. So, yeah, I think the question would be, what is my fear of sharing my stories? What is my concern? What is my belief that holds me back, that tells me I shouldn't, or I can't, or I'm not good at it? And press into that with God. Because that doesn't mean you need to be a marketer, a professional marketer, but the passion you have for creating your story, if you can help others get excited about that story, well, that's sharing it. So sharing it isn't saying, look at me, or let me build my name or my brand. Is saying, hey, I've got a really good story, and if you're interested in these kind of topics, come with me. Like you're gonna dig this. This is gonna be really cool. And that's authentic. And so if it's gimmicky, or if it's just trying to build, metrics by playing the social media game, I'm not a big fan of that. But if it's genuine, follow me, come with me on this journey if you like this kind of story, and let me tell you a little bit about it. I think that's contagious to the, in a good way, to the audience that's like-minded, kindred spirits.
All right, Alan, we've got a growing number of questions still here. I think what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and play that, the Realm Makers video, and then we'll continue with the Q&A, but we'll stop streaming, we'll stop simulcasting to our friends who are watching on Facebook or YouTube or on LinkedIn. So, but then we'll get back to the Q&A. And those of you watching, if you want to join us for these and hang around for the rest of the Q&A, you can go into the Realm Sphere at community.realmmakers.com and find us here. Here's a little Realm Makers, a little taste of last year.
conference that I know of that is God-centered science fiction and fantasy writing authors.
I wouldn't have books without Realm Makers. The environment here, when you walk in, whether it's your first year or your 12th year, every time you walk in, somebody is there ready to encourage you. Everybody is here working for each other. It's like coming home every year.
I've been to every major conference in the industry. Realm Makers is very interesting because of its specificity. This is the only one that is 100% focused on the speculative genre.
That was really cool.
Well, we're going to say goodbye to our friends on Facebook. Bye-bye.